So hi everybody. When we come to the end bit, I'm going to do my kind of, oh look, we've worked with this person, I recommend this person and all the rest of it, because actually it's quite nice to see some familiar faces on the screen. But I'll rattle through this quickly, and then if you've got any questions at all, then sort of just put them in the chat or shout out. So I'm Nicky Rudd, I'm MD of Padua Communications. We do these 4 things that you can see on the screen: events, marketing, PR and content. And we are a teenager. Woohoo! The business is 13 years old this month. And we've got some very exciting sort of news as well, because we have also been shortlisted as one of the finalists in the awards, along with the lovely Fordingbridge Print, who are neighbours of ours at Glasshouse Studios in Fordingbridge. Which is where I'm based, but I'm going to be based even closer because I'm moving into the same unit as they are, but 4 doors down. So that's all going to be lovely. And also we are hoping to take on 1 and possibly 2 digital marketing apprentices in January. So we've got Lizzie on here as well, who's also been super helpful. So there's been lots and lots and lots of stuff going on, all well and good. We work predominantly in the B2B sector, but we do have some B2C clients, and we help businesses basically tell stories for long-term brand awareness and short-term sort of sales campaign. And we work across lots of different industry sectors. With businesses large and small. So that's just kind of a bit of a background. It's my business. I run it with my husband, which is sometimes a delight and often not. But we do it so that we can do 50-50 childcare, because we have an 8-year-old, and that's really important to us because we're a real sort of family business. So this talk, and I said there's a lot in there. I don't know if Matthew might want to send a deck out, or if you email me, I can send it out afterwards. But it's a well-worn adage in the marketing world that as soon as times get tough, the marketing budget is the first thing to be cut and kind of looked at. And I think probably everybody on this call is going, oh, it's November, we possibly should be thinking about next year. And it's really hard to plan because we're in complete economic turmoil again. I mean, if we think back in the last month to the whole trust debacle, and kind of, what was happening, sort of up in Westminster, and then the kind of fallout from it. It's very, very hard to plan. But I would say, although there is still some positives, because it's a little bit easier to plan than it was in the pandemic, where you didn't know what was going to happen, sort of day by day. And I would say that marketing budgets they shouldn't be cut, because actually there is, some research now that when things pick up, which they obviously do because the whole economy thing is sort of cyclical, that those people who have kind of maintained their marketing focus are in a strong position, sort of to then kind of leap off and do the next bits of activity. So this talk is just basically to try and give some tips in how to kind of go through that process of kind of what are you going to do for next year, and sort of how agile you kind of need to be. So the first thing is to actually really identify your future aims. Now, I said about the fact that it's hard to plan, but I think we all know where our businesses, kind of where we want them to be longer term. It might be that actually you're thinking, I want to be retired in 5 years and playing golf 4 days a week. Or it might be that you're like, actually, I want this to still be a kind of business that I can kind of come in, come out. Or it might be like my business, one that I know I'm going to be working at for a long time, because I have an 8-year-old and she hasn't even thought about university yet and all that kind of stuff. So I'm going to just carry on going. And also I love what I do. So happy days. But you need to have a think about what those future aims are, because I think in many cases, people sort of, we're all creatures of habit. So there's a case really of everybody going, okay, right, well, I'm going to do marketing, and actually we've always done that, so let's do that again, rather than actually being a real sort of critical eye and looking at your business aims, where they want to be, and whether your marketing will actually sort of meet that, and also how realistic you can be with those aims and with the budget that you've got and your time and your team. So I always think that actually this is a really lovely time of the year, because you can sort of draw a line in the sand, and kind of give yourself permission to sort of be like, I tried that and maybe it didn't work like it should have done, and why is that? Or actually we did that by accident and flipping heck, it worked brilliantly, So why was that? And it's a real kind of a learning kind of time as well. But make sure that when you're starting out with your plan and your strategy, that you are thinking about those future business aims. You know, we're always sort of saying in marketing about kind of trying to do the long-term plan and the short term, and that's been quite hard over the last sort of 18 months, 2 years. But I think we're back there. I think, you know, even with the kind of tough times and the kind of, you know, turbulent economic climate, you're still thinking kind of what is the long-term goal and actually how you might have to navigate the short term to kind of get you there. And make sure that you're not just thinking, okay, I'm just doing it for sales sake. Because actually, when you're thinking about your brand and you're marketing your brand, particularly in tough times, that is when you're really looking, or customers are really looking to sort of see whether they can trust you and whether you're going to be around for the long term. But I'll come on to that in a couple of slides. So I said about it being a kind of like line in the sand. It's one of those things when you're doing a marketing strategy that you're sort of looking ahead and those sort of future vision of kind of where you want to be, but it's also a case of looking, you know, sort of backwards. And actually this year, we've probably done the first full year since the pandemic started where it's been a bit more normal. You know, there's been kind of face-to-face events, there's been other networking opportunities. It hasn't all just been, you know, sort of online and in a box with us all kind of just tapping away on a keyboard. So you know, you can really look critically at kind of what has worked and, you know, what is working and what's not. And also where you think you could get more value by increasing your spend in different areas, and also what things you can completely give up. So I think, you know, a good example of this would be how much time are you spending on social media? How many social media channels are you on? Are your customers on there? Have you got any leads from it? And if you haven't, and no is, you know, no is the answer to those questions, why are you spending that much time doing that? You know, maybe actually think about which ones you should be on and which ones you are engaging with. So be really critical, be your own critical friend, if you like, about this. And I would say as well, it's really important to think about the money side of things. I think a lot of people think, oh yeah, you know, sort of it's marketing, it's the fun, creative, colourful stuff, you know, but actually it is cost. And even if it's not cost financially out, there is a time element to it. So kind of really be honest with yourself about how much time it's taking you out of your business, because you might also be looking at, am I the right person to be doing this particular job, or should I be outsourcing certain parts of it? So I mentioned about the identifying your most profitable marketing channels. So have a look at kind of, you know, everything. You know, take your time out of your office. I would do my marketing strategy in somewhere where it's got really, really rubbish mobile reception, but really good tea and cake, because it takes time and it's hard. And if you're doing it well, you need to put the effort in. So have a look at, you know, sort of what channels. And I think quite often, unless you do that kind of take your time out and have a look at it, you can sometimes completely forget stuff that you're doing, you know. So, you know, if you've got, for example, a subscription or a direct debit that goes out for NFBP, as an example, very good use of money, I would say. But actually, it might just be that you don't even consider that as part of your marketing plan because it just comes out. So have a look at kind of all of the different marketing channels that you're using. And then really have a think about where your customers are and where your prospects are. Make sure that you are using the ones that are going to give you the ROI, because when things get tough, the worst thing is diluting yourself across so many things that you're not doing anything well. And I love this exercise every year, which we look at kind of where all our leads have come from, and we work out kind of what the sales cycle has been for them, so that you can see just how relevant the different marketing channels that you've been using are and how they kind of mesh together. That's one of my favorite things to do. But so if you've never done that before, just have a look, because you might actually really learn about your business that it's not actually 6-month sales cycle, but actually it's 18 months. With a lot of kind of brand awareness up front, which I would imagine actually in a lot of cases it is. The other thing to do is have a look at what the competition is doing. So when things get a bit kind of up in the air, it's one of those things that you can have a look and see if there's kind of scope to take market share, or kind of where competitors have been, if they're not actually sort of booked in to do as much, or they are changing their strategy. There is real scope for you to kind of grow into that space. And that's why I say about actually being really realistic about the amount of budget that you've got. Because if you're just doing the same old, it actually, unless you've got extra budget, it's really hard to look at new opportunities and try new things out. But this is a really, really great way of being able to maybe take some of that market share and get kind of visibility in a bit of a wider area than you previously have been. I just thought this slide was quite interesting. There's a link at the bottom, which I can sort of send around, but basically just a kind of a look at how much percentage-wise the marketing budget is of kind of sales revenue. You can see for kind of very kind of consumer-focused businesses, it's much, much higher. If you've got something that's a bit more niche, if you're in an industry like manufacturing or energy, it's much sort of less, where there's probably sort of fewer players within that space. But we do get asked quite often about how much money should I be spending on marketing. So there's a general rule of thumb in the marketing world that you should aim to spend between 2 to 5% of your sales revenue on marketing. And that's been based on kind of, sort of previous marketing experience and feedback from companies who have kind of done the sort of the sums, if you like. But I think the really interesting thing is, if you are spending kind of 5% of that, that will maintain your brand awareness and visibility in your kind of current space. So, you're not growing your market share. If you are thinking, I'm going to be a bit more aggressive because we really want to have kind of growth next year, even though it's going to be tough times and we're going to try and kind of be a bit disruptive about how we're going to do things, then to grow your market share, you're really looking at between 5 and 10% of your sales revenue. So when you're thinking about your finance and kind of like, oh my God, is marketing a really expensive thing? Have a look at kind of your income and just sort of see whether actually it equates. Because if you have got the best product in the world, but you're not actually marketing it in the most effective way that you can be, you are not going to be out there. And your competitors will be, if they are actually putting that kind of effort in from a time point of view and a money point of view as well. So I always try and encourage kind of the sort of clients that we work with to think of marketing as an investment. I would do. I run a content marketing PR agency, but actually there is a reason for this. So particularly if you have to work with other people and they kind of sign off on kind of, how much your spend is, they see it as a kind of fixed cost on a budget sheet of kind of how much is marketing going out, or how much you're spending on other agencies or ads or, networking. But actually marketing is much more of a longer term investment, and trying to kind of do a bit of education and also to understand that yourself is quite key. So I always sort of think a good way to think about your kind of annual marketing budget is to think about it into campaigns. Now it might be 2 6-month campaigns, or it might be quarterly campaigns or particular sales campaigns, but also make sure you take a slice of the pie for kind of corporate brand building. So that's not the product or the service that you're doing, but actually you as a business. So for example, we have a PR offering called Paparazzo. It's not to kind of market that, it's to market Padua Communications, us as a company, kind of who what we're about. And that means that basically you've got kind of a foot in both camps. The corporate brand building can tie into other initiatives into your business, so they wouldn't necessarily all be kind of sales focused, but they will be there to kind of buoy that sort of sales focus up. And it's also the long-term investment for brand awareness that will work harder for you in tough economic kind of conditions. And the reason for that is, when we think of ourselves as buyers, no matter what you're buying, but particularly if you're buying something that's a bit more expensive, there might be a kind of service contract, or there might be kind of a follow-up activity, or it might be a kind of larger investment. And you want to make sure that the company that you've bought that stuff from is going to be around for the long term. So trying to make sure that you've got a short-term kind of campaigns running and longer term is absolutely key. And just to demonstrate that, that's sort of the red up and down kind of squiggles on this might be a kind of like an actual sales campaign that you're doing over a quarter. So it might tie into Christmas, for example, or Valentine's Day when you're doing the run up to it. The blue kind of longer term stuff that sort of grows, that's about brand building, and that's about sort of you as a business and what makes you, what your DNA is, what makes you you. And the two kind of sort of sides of those kind of aims, if they gel together, you've won the golden ticket. The long term basically influences future sales. It shows that you are a serious player, a kind of thought leadership. It's kind of the kind of PR side, if you like, of your business, and it kind of primes your customers with kind of what you're about. How green are you? Sort of how much do you do with the local community? The short-term stuff is much more about kind of that brand equity. So it uses the kind of corporate branding, but it also generates sales now for kind of products and services. It's much more persuasive. There's much stronger calls to action of like buy now, or there might be discounted if you book before so-and-so. And it's got much more of a sort of product focus rather than a kind of company corporate brand focus. So those two things, when you're actually sort of thinking that, and you're putting your strategy together, is thinking about you as a brand and kind of what you're saying. The other thing that's absolutely key is to think about your audience and where your customers are. And I mentioned about the kind of when you're reviewing, where are they and where have your leads coming from? But also in tough times, I think we all are probably guilty of thinking we just need new business in. That's what's needed for growth. But actually, in tough times, it's possibly easier to go and see if you can upsell to existing customers, and also customers that you might have worked with, or partners or people within your network that already know you as a brand, that already have been primed about that kind of who you are as a business. So make sure that you're not just thinking we're just making the job so hard, we're looking for new stuff all the time, when it's already going to be tough enough. So spend some time having a look at whether you've got an Excel spreadsheet, or whether you've got a CRM system. Who have you got in there that you might actually be able to reach out to, that you've already had some contact with, and make sure that your strategy covers retaining existing customers as well as attracting new ones. And also see if you can profile them. Again, I'm such a geek, really. I do just love my job. But basically, this is a brilliant exercise for kind of profiling your customers. Now, sometimes it's called, when you're talking about your customers and your prospects, sort of brand personas, and it can sound really fancy and the rest of it. It's basically not. You're building a profile of who you're trying to speak to and what their problems are and how you might be able to solve them, and what sort of age they are, and kind of what they might read and what social media channel they might be on, just so that you can work out, okay, I need to be on there if I'm talking to that sort of person. So when you're profiling your customers, take two customers, your most profitable one and the one that you love working with. If they are the same people, bonus, but quite often they're not. Quite often the most profitable one might be the most demanding one of your time, and they might give you kind of harder work, or they might challenge you with thinking in a particular way. And the one you love working with might just be an absolute hoot to have meetings with, but it might be a smaller account, and they might not pay you that much, or you might not work with them all the time. But review the marketing activity for both as part of your plan, and identify how many of the profitable ones you need to ensure that you can actually work with the ones you like working with, because we all need money in to be successful. We're all in business for a reason, but at the same time, you need to be in business and liking the people that you're working with. So just see if you can get that balance right. And also with this, again, when I said about being a critical friend to yourself, make sure that you are looking at not just the money in, but what are the costs associated with them both, of how much time and how much effort you are spending with them, and how much money you might have to spend out to keep them on side. And sort of think with your business, which type would I like to attract more of, and how does that fit in with that kind of long-term vision as you're doing your plan? And then when you're actually thinking, okay, I've got all of that sorted, and we've got this much to spend, what are we going to spend it on? As part of your planning, think about your evergreen assets. And what I mean by that are the things that basically have longevity. If you're making sure that you've got marketing assets, make sure that they are going to work for you over a longer period of time. So case studies are my absolutely top of the list. They work for existing customers, they work for new customers, they can work for prospects. They can last because unless you massively have changed your business, they tell the story about what it's like about working with you. They can be kind of application focused. Even if you can't mention a company name because there's a certain DNA, you can still kind of tell that story of what it's like as an example of working with you. For the other things on this list of video and branded merchandise, what I would say is actually have a think about the longer term kind of corporate brands, rather than necessarily all being kind of, sort of product and sales and, a particular service focus. think about it from that sort of longer term, because actually, if you make a really good investment, it won't just be a cost for this year. You might have that actually you can still stretch things into the year after that. So just make sure that you are thinking longer term, as well as just, God, I need something for this show, or what are we going to, give out if we're going to this networking event? And the video side about it, make sure that you've actually done the thinking about what you want that video to do, so that the brief and is complete, so that when you're actually filming, it might be a bit more time, there might be a bit more time with editing, but actually that video will give you what you need. And quite a lot of it can be done on this for sort of social, but if you're thinking that you are going to do a kind of a bit more expensive corporate video, that kind of thinking up front is absolutely crucial. We all learned from the pandemic how brilliant digital content is, and obviously I am the owner of a content sort of agency, but the brilliant thing about digital content is that you can do it again. They can last unless your business or your product or service massively changes, and they can also be updated really easily. So although I would say printing of stuff is fantastic, 40 Bridge Print are very, very good at it because we use them a lot. But actually having digital content that you can update and that you can use behind kind of, on landing pages and behind gated content is really key as well. Likewise, how-to guides, also virtual events. So I know that we're all doing kind of face-to-face. I'm dying to go to the award ceremony. I'm already thinking about what dress I'm going to wear and whether actually I'm going to have to stop eating chocolate for the next 3 weeks to fit into it. But anyway, but actually running your own virtual events is a really, really effective way of being able to market your business, show your skill set, but also not cost loads as well. With a website, make sure that if you are thinking, God, we need to do a bit of a refresh of it, it doesn't necessarily always have to be we're going to build a completely new website from scratch, but make sure that you've got control of your content management system, that you can upload blog posts, because that's one of the things in tough times. If you can just even update that, you're making sure that your current website is working for you, and also that you can change the homepage. And if you haven't got the control of the CMS, then make sure that you've got some time and budget in to make sure somebody who's technical, and I don't know if Rob's on here, but he's also brilliant, in case he can actually sort of help with making sure that being able to change the front page and keep it updated is absolutely key as well. And likewise, infographics and imagery. There's lots of kind of royalty-free sites where you can do some work on kind of, getting images that don't cost very much. But if you're thinking, well, actually, I'm going to do this as investment and I want it so that we own it and I've got control and there's consistency in that brand, it might be that actually you pull in a photographer and you get your own assets shot and that's what you use. And again, it doesn't need to be an expensive thing if you've thought about it up front and you've really worked on the brief for it. And then lastly on here, I've put email marketing campaigns. And what I would say about that is, there's MailChimp, there's HubSpot, there's lots out there, and they now, most of them have fantastic functionality in there for you to be able to try different things, create landing pages from them. So with that kind of contact detail that you've already got, that you've already been building up, see what you can do to make that work more effectively for you. And then try and make it so that you've got some data collection and analysis in your 2023 marketing plan. So this job that you're about to do now is much, much easier if you've got some insights and you're not having to sort of scrabble around and pull everything together. So even if you're thinking, well, over the next 12 months, I'm going to basically make sure that I do pull off information from Google Analytics, or I'm going to look at the MailChimp Analytics about kind of email opening up. Make sure that you've got those things in place and that you've done some kind of training. There's fantastic videos so that you can just take time out of your day to kind of educate yourself on what you're supposed to be looking for. But I think an awful lot of time can sometimes be spent of pulling off reports and then nothing's done from it. Make sure that you have got some time in there to think, well, okay, how am I going to use those insights? Because again, next year, we are going to have to be probably incredibly agile about how we think about marketing. So I know I've said about kind of thinking a little bit longer, but I think still, if you can think about campaigns as part of it and make sure that you remain agile, just in case you have to sort of, swap around activity because things are tougher and, nobody knows how the recession is going to hit business. But just making those little changes of being able to learn from stuff that you're doing and then be able to, and I'm going to say the pivot word, even though I hate it, but pivot again, but not the pandemic pivot, the recession pivot, then that would be absolutely key. This is a bit about us, and we've got kind of some service, and one of the things that we do is a duo service, which is basically a couple of hours. So if you're getting to the stage where you're thinking, I want to do marketing strategy and I want to have a bit of a think about it, but I literally hate doing this because I just don't know where to start, then come and have a chat. Or if I've got several people who are thinking about doing it, I'll run you through a group of them, so all at once, so that we could do it as a workshop. So let me know. And then lastly, just to say, we do a link and learn session every single month, which Matthew always kind of shares and all the rest of it. But we take a topic every month and we basically break it down. It's a very, very small group. And I'm just in the planning stages for 2023 about kind of what topics we're going to do. So if there are certain things that you're thinking, I would like to know more about that, I would love to hear from you so I can add it into our planning campaign. That's it from me. Any questions?